What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a great day out there. Interesting market that we had today. Square reported earnings after the bell today, ticker symbol SQ. Now, during the regular session, this stock was off pretty big, actually, down 4%, even larger than that. It was down to $232 per share, rebounded like a lot of stocks did today. Now, in the after hours, we're trading down another 4.5%, down to about $245 per share. When we go over to the stock chart, we'll talk about what this means for Square. Now, if you're new to the channel or you've been here for a while, what we do is we go over the financials. And so I think this is really important thing to do when any company that you want to invest in or that you are invested in, go over the financials so you have these fundamentals, the revenue growth, the profit, the trends that the company is generating on the fundamental basis side. So when we have these big pullbacks, then you can focus on, are you going to buy this stock? Are you going to add to your position? You will have already know these things. So hopefully on this channel, we develop that system for you because I think it is one that will work for you as an investor. So Square reported earnings today. Over the last year, the stock's up a little light, 231%. So yeah, we pulled back about 9%, but it's not that big of a deal if you've been holding this one for a while. So earnings came in, profit rose modestly a little bit. And then when you look, here's the thing. Here's what I want to jump into really quickly here. So we've got Cash App. So Square's got a couple businesses going on. They got this Bitcoin thing going on. They've got Cash App. They've got obviously the sellers kind of running payment processing through. You see your Cash App gross profit quarter over quarter was actually down. And I think obviously year over year, the growth is just phenomenal. It's over 100% growth over the last year. But I think investors are digesting, well, look at this. We're kind of topping out here, over the last 2 quarters. Same here with seller gross profit. We basically, I wouldn't call that flat. You're up 27% year over year. That's solid growth still, but you're starting to see that flatten out a little bit. And then you've got adjusted EBITDA here as well. Not a figure I typically focus on, but again, you're basically flat quarter over quarter. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I think investors are going to start to digest that to a certain degree. Now, jumping into the numbers, Square's one of the most interesting companies because they actually have quite a few, believe it or not, they have quite a few things going on here. So we've got the 3 months ended here, 19 over 20. We've got the year ended here, 19 over 20. We've got this transaction-based revenue. And we see here, it went from 831 up to 929 in the quarter, pretty solid growth. For the full year, essentially flat, up a couple $100 million. Subscription and service-based revenue, this is Cash App and things like that, went from 281 up to 449. So impressive growth there. On the full year, you're still seeing that type of growth, maybe not as explosive as you saw there in the quarter. Hardware revenue, basically flat. It is a loss leader for them. They basically give this hardware away for free to drive some of the other revenues. Now, Bitcoin is really interesting. Take a look at this. Last year, they made 177. That's 177 million in the quarter. Oh, that just ticked up about $1 billion to 1.756. When we talk about the cost of that, I'll let you know why maybe the stock isn't soaring in the after hours on adding $1 billion to your revenue in the Bitcoin. We see for the full year added $4 billion to that Bitcoin revenue. Total revenue coming in at $3.1 billion. That is almost $2 billion more than the previous year. For the full year, we're up about $5 billion. So extraordinarily quick growing company on that top line. That is why you see this stock is just rip roaring up. We got $125 billion valuation, up again over 200% over the last year. Now it's not the full story. Okay. We've got our cost of revenue. What I want to highlight here is Bitcoin. We talked about how that was up $1 billion. Well, we spent $1.715 billion to make $1.756 billion. So it is a business where they're kind of facilitating those transactions. They made about $40 million in the quarter. Again, nothing at all to sneeze at. And the fact that they've bolted this on, I mean, last year they only made, I say only, but they really only made $3 million in the quarter, and they boosted that up to $40 million. So who knows how high that can grow. We see here for the full year, they spent $447 to make $4,571. So again, they made about $100 million just kind of facilitating this Bitcoin stuff. So really, really solid. And then we're coming down here to gross profit. Here's our total cost of revenue. So our total revenue here for the quarter was 3.158. We spent 2.3 and we gross out $803 million. In the previous period, we made 527. So solid growth there, year over year on a quarterly basis. Now, year over year, we went from about 1.9 up to $2.7 billion gross profit. So this is a company that is profitable from a gross perspective. Now, that's not the only expenses that we have here. We've got product development, sales and marketing, general and administrative, and transaction and loan losses. Interesting to see that those loan losses actually got cut in half over the last year. That's a bullish sign, although year over year, they're actually up marginally. So we've got operating income. They swung to a pretty nice operating income in the quarter to $45 million. Again, you can almost attribute a lot of that to this Bitcoin because they cleared about $40 million on that Bitcoin. All things else being equal, a lot of that flowed down here. Now, in the last year, they made $17 million. You see, for the full year, we did lose $18 million. And the previous year, they made 26. But again, does it look like on this chart that investors really care about operating income? That's something you always want to ask yourself when you look at these financials. Does the market really care? Well, they don't care right now. Maybe they will at some point, but they care about this top line growth, and they are delivering at Square. Now, from the balance sheet perspective, I saw on the press release that they bought a little bit more Bitcoin. So I thought that was interesting that they are putting money into Bitcoin, not just the revenue that they have over at Square on Bitcoin, but Square is actually investing some of their cash assets on the balance sheet. They have about $3.15 billion in cash and cash equivalents. They're taking some of this money and actually investing it into Bitcoin. Now, I haven't confirmed this, but I would assume this cash and cash equivalents is cash and cash equivalents. It's not Bitcoin. My guess is other current assets could be the Bitcoin, because we went from 250 up to $383 million. That's where I think they would put it. I don't know how the SEC handles this, but I would guess this is where they're putting that. We've got investments in short-term debt securities. That's not going to be the Bitcoin, but that's basically cash as well. We've got settlements receivable. All things considered, take a look at the total current assets went from 3.2 up to $7.7 billion. So you've got a little exposure to Bitcoin's price rising because they carry Square carries some of their cash balance, much like Tesla is doing right now as well, and some other smaller companies. They're carrying some of their cash balance actually in physical Bitcoin. So that's really interesting. Now, total assets went from 4.5 up to 9.8. On the liability side, you got a small amount of long-term debt here. It actually ticked up quite a bit. You were at about $1 billion last year. Now we're up to $2.5 billion. Not too concerning, obviously, with the amount of cash. That's where a lot of this addition probably to the cash happened. And look, if Bitcoin continues to ride, they got a couple $100 million in Bitcoin as well. Last thing I want to show you that investors are probably digesting as well is we've got our cash flows. So we got our year end last year at 19. And then we got 20. So this is the last document before we jump over to the stock chart here. So cash flows went from positive 465 last year down a little bit to 381. So we shed off about $80 million in cash flows. A lot of it probably tied up. You got this share-based compensation. That's actually what you're getting added back in. Our net income was lower this year compared to last year as well. So that's really driving the cash flows down. That's probably, I don't want to say it has investors worried, but it definitely didn't help propel the stock in the after hours trade. We're seeing here the stock topped out just a couple days ago at about $283. And like most stocks in the market, especially kind of tech stocks and maybe like hyper valued tech stocks, this one has started to sell off. And we're actually approaching kind of an area here where if you want to get back into Square, if you don't have a position in this one, or you want to add, say you have a position and you want to add to it, well, between $215 and $240 is an interesting level. You had some sideways consolidation here. This $215 level held a couple different times. We kind of pierced through it here. And this, I would actually expect the stock, it's interesting, the stock kind of wicked right through 240 and then bounced right back up here to 246. If we have further pullbacks in the market, which I honestly am anticipating further pullbacks in the market, this one, under that $240 price would be somewhat interesting. Now, if we have kind of a cataclysmic event and the market just really continues to sell off, a lot of negative sentiment, well, once we break 215, then you've got a couple stops down here at 200, and then you come back. Look, we've been analyzing the stock for a while. You come back to these zones. That's why I always leave my zones up. You come down here to 191 and maybe 171. Okay, that's very, very bear case scenario, but if you're going to be buying up here at 215 to 240, it's just something that you want to keep in mind, that if we break 215, well, then all of a sudden 200 is in play. And then after that, under 200 is certainly in play at that point. So just some things that you want to be aware of. Now, Square looking good, looking like we're kind of starting to top out in terms of the growth, in terms of the Cash App gross profit. Obviously, revenues are just absolutely on fire, but they weren't able to really convert that into more net income and obviously more cash flow for the company. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with Square, if they're able to regain that momentum, and if they don't, will the stock continue to slide? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. We'll be back with more videos. Leave me a comment. Leave me a question. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck with your investments.